Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this, the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better, and boy are they gonna get worse. So today it's going to be a video where I complain about the Equality Act yet again. An old Blair Brown relic that was brought in just before the Tories got in, and the Tories kept it and celebrated it at every turning point that they could. We did it! Next shop workers win equal pay claim. Is it equal pay for equal work? Well, if it was, I wouldn't be making this video. More than 3,500 current and former workers at Next have won the final stage of a 6-year legal battle for equal pay. Yeah, this was all happening under the Tories, by the way. We can't really blame Labour too much for this one. They did bring in the original legislation with the Equality Act, but yeah, the Tories celebrated that act, so I blame them probably more than Labour at this point. An employment tribunal said store staff who were predominantly women should not have been paid at lower rates than employees in warehouses who are typically male. In other words, it is now legally binding that women should be paid as much as men for completely different jobs. Lawyers for the shop staff described the judgment as hugely significant, and the amount of back pay owed could amount to more than £30 million. Yeah, I'm not being funny, but especially with smaller chains or even local businesses who rely on warehouse work, you're probably going to see quite a few companies going bust if this goes mainstream, because Next are obviously appealing this because it is absolutely mental. As they say there, Next would be appealing against the ruling, because Next argued that the pay rates for warehouse workers were higher than for retail workers in the wider labour market, justifying the different rates at the company. Now, I'm not particularly surprised they lost this case with that reasoning. You need to do a bit more work than that. You need to effectively say warehouse work's more grueling, let's say, it's more uncomfortable, it's more out the way, it's more physically demanding, you probably need forklift licenses in some cases. But there's none of that. It's just, well, the wider market says so. That's never going to fly when we don't live in a capitalist country. I've been saying for some time that effectively we live under socialism, and basically everything that goes through court proves to me that that is not just a cliche. We literally live in a country where pay is just. Whatever the hell that means. No, pay is an agreement between you and your employer. These women, for at least 6 years, way more than that, will have, and men by the way, men work at Next, but these people on the Next shop floor will have agreed pay for their work. The warehouse workers will have agreed pay for their work. If these people wanted more pay, they should have gone to the warehouses, but they didn't. Instead they took it to court. This should have been thrown out on day one, but we have ridiculous laws on the books that, again, the Tories have been celebrating. Not just ignoring, celebrating. The Employment Tribunal rejected that argument as a justification for the pay differences. It means women such as Helen Scarbrooks, who had worked for Next for more than 20 years, are in line to receive thousands of pounds compensation for the pay they missed out on. We did it, the 68-year-old from Eastleigh near Southampton, one of the lead claimants in the case, said. It's been a long 6 years battling for equal pay we all felt we rightly deserved, but today we can say we won. Yes, according to the laws of Britain, if you feel that you deserve more pay, you can complain and get it. As long as you're a woman, of course. Anyone who works in retail knows it's a physically and emotionally tough job. Get out of it. I've worked retail, it's not that bad. We do lots of heavy lifting. From my experience, the women are doing less of the heavy lifting, just saying. The same as the men do in the warehouse. That's definitely not true. We lift the same boxes as they lift. Again, not even true. It's pretty typical for warehouse workers to need forklift licenses for a reason. Add to that the unpredictability of customers who are sometimes wonderful but sometimes challenging, she said. It's an enjoyable job. I wonder how many warehouse workers say their job is enjoyable, but it's not easy and it's really undervalued financially, and I just thought it had to stop, she told the BBC. If you feel undervalued, get another job where you feel more valued. That's exactly what I did. I got fed up with my retail job, I felt undervalued for my skill set, and so I moved into software development, teaching myself when I was outside of my part-time hours. I'm not being funny when I say this. You can do it. But no, that's apparently not how these women thought. They thought, oh, well, it must be because we're women we're undervalued, so we're just going to challenge them at court. Not individually go to their employer and say, I feel undervalued, is there any way that I could be paid a bit more? And they'll probably say no because you're put in bands, and then, you just say, okay, we'll find someone else for the job, then I'm moving somewhere where I'm valued. But no, they couldn't do that. They had to go to court, and amazingly, because we have stupid laws on the books, but they went through with it and won. And I'm not joking when I say this is going to bankrupt companies. Because not only do they have to pay them the same rate as warehouse workers now, and odds are what they're going to do is lower the wage for warehouse workers so that they can actually equal out the financial loss from this, meaning that there'll probably be a shortage of warehouse workers after this. But these are second, third order consequences that no one thought about. But as I say, not only do they have to pay them equally now, but they have to pay £30 million in backdated underpayments. That is absolute nonsense. Imagine working for someone all your life, and all your life you have agreed to the salary that you were paid for your work, and then you just take them to court and say, you know what, you actually owe me tens of thousands of pounds in backdated payments. I cannot tell you how much I hate the idea of backdated payments. The whole point of a career, and why an awful lot of people high up in companies are paid an awful lot, effectively that is to make up for backdated payments. You are paid effectively part of your salary for all the training and experience that you have gained over the years. So you get money on top of that plus for the job you work. They want people with experience. Eventually, if you actually move up a career ladder, you will get the payment for that. It's not my fault these women thought they were perfectly fine being shop assistants forever and thought that they could end up with more money just for doing the same job all the time. By the way, I don't even have to go to hypotheticals to say why this will bankrupt companies. This law has already bankrupt councils. A deal that would have settled Birmingham's huge equal pay claims without bankrupting the council fell apart after trade unions found members were still suffering discrimination. Birmingham City Council is in financial crisis on multiple fronts. An equal pay claim of up to £760 million are among the bills it cannot afford, but since the extent of the crisis was revealed last month, it has emerged the council thought it could originally settle the matter for just £120 million, which is still an absolutely insane amount of money, and this was all because dinner ladies and other public sector workers who were typically female were they were supposed to be on the same band as bin workers, but bin workers got a raise because they all striked, and so they got a pay rise, and yet other people in that same band didn't, who were typically, you know, more female jobs, dinner ladies, cleaners, things like that. And so obviously they took them to court in largely the same way as these next workers, and, well, they've ended up bankrupting not just Birmingham City Council, but plenty of others. I've covered it in the past, but as I say, this law is literally bankrupting everyone, basically because women can't be bothered to get higher paying jobs. Anyway, Ms. Scarsbrook put a claim in 2018 and should receive compensation for being paid less than her male counterparts in the warehouse going back 6 years to 2012. What the hell? Again, before she even put the claim in, she thinks she should be paid backdated pay. Absolute nonsense. I think I hate this paragraph more than any other. It is likely to amount to several thousands of pounds, which would let her pay off her car loan, take a very nice holiday, or perhaps retire, she told the BBC. She was not even struggling for money. I think that's the part that annoys me the most. This was nothing but greed. She couldn't be told, she couldn't take no for an answer, which I suppose is something that I can admire. But the reason she was being told no is because her argument was ridiculous. According to UK law, though, no it wasn't. Elizabeth George, barrister and partner at the law firm Gláeddyv representing the workers, said the ruling would come as a huge encouragement to workers in other sectors. Yeah, this is going to get a hell of a lot worse, by the way. Retail isn't the only sector where you have jobs that are divided along career, gender lines, and you see the male-dominated market is attracting a higher rate than the female-dominated role, she said. Yeah, I mean, I could get the stats up again, but men work longer hours than women. Men take more risks than women. Men generally work harder than women. It is true, yes. This is probably why you see male-dominated roles dominating these markets and getting higher pay, because men are happy to know their worth and work harder for it. Workers at 5 of the UK's largest supermarkets, as do Tesco, Morrisons, Sainsbury's and the Co-op, are all pursuing equal pay cases, and they're obviously going to win as well. The precedent's set. I hope you enjoy expensive food, people, because you thought food inflation was bad before. Wait till this goes through. With the firms using the same arguments as next around market pay rates to counter them, Ms. George said she believed the judgment could prompt further cases, for example in the care sector, hospitality or construction. So great, all of those are now going to cost even more as well, because all these companies are going to have to defend themselves in court for effectively following market conditions. which is what we're supposed to do in a country that's supposed to be free market. But as I've said for a while, we've not been free market for decades. There have already been cases in the public sector over lower pay for workers, including teaching assistants and dinner ladies paid less than men employed in refuse collection and similar roles. I love it. The argument is women should be paid the same as men for completely different jobs. Again, it's not even 100% women and 100% men in these jobs. It's probably close to 90%, though, to be fair. But quite frankly, the country cannot keep running on this idea that different jobs all deserve the same pay. I mean, that would be ridiculous. The admin staff at software companies should not be earning the same as the software developers. The secretaries at finance companies should not be paid the same amount as the financial analysts. The workers should not be paid the same as the CEOs. They are completely different jobs. Yet under British law, apparently it doesn't matter. This is going to ruin the economy that's already been stagnant for decades. So Next made a statement saying this is the first equal pay group action in the private sector to reach a decision at tribunal level and raises a number of important points of legal principle. The first emphasised that no cases alleging direct discrimination against female staff were upheld, and that the tribunal found that there was no conscious or subconscious gender influence in the way Next set pay rates. So this wasn't even about discrimination. They found there was no discrimination, and yet they said you need to set your pay equal between the shop assistant staff and the warehouse staff, otherwise you're sexist. You're literally breaking equality law due to sexism. And yet there was no discrimination found. I want to read these notes in a sec. Barrister Ms. George said the tribunal rightly found that Next could have afforded to pay at a higher rate but chose not to, and the reason for that was purely financial. I'm sorry, I needed to let that pause linger. Yeah, that's typically what pay comes down to. They are a company, they are trying to make a profit here. The argument around market rates was essentially circular, Ms. George added, suggesting women should be paid less because they're already currently being paid less elsewhere. That's not how market rates work. I mean, as I said at the beginning, I don't think it was the best case to make for Next, and I hope that when they appeal they will be making much better arguments. But honestly, this is one of those traditional arguments that people have kind of forgotten the whole reasoning behind why we say there are market rates. It's not that it's circular, it's that ultimately these women are happy to be paid this amount of money and are not willing to move jobs for better pay. Therefore, that is the rate at which overall as a society people are agreeing that is a good rate. That is effectively what they're saying. The fact they've taken this to court is effectively just taking advantage and using legal weapons to their advantage. The Equality Act is a stupid law. That's pretty much all I need to say here. So Lee Day said the claimant's contracts would now be changed to reflect fairer rates of pay, whatever that means. In other areas where there was a mismatch, for example, over different ways of calculating night payments, paid rest breaks for warehouse staff and Sunday pay, better terms would also be extended to shop staff. However, it would not yet be clear whether other staff not directly involved in the case would see their employment terms upgraded automatically, she said. They're probably going to, just to avoid having to do the back pay stuff. The process of calculating what claimants were owed as back pay should begin as soon as possible, said Ms. George. And I really do think that's one of the most stupid parts of this whole process. Not only are they having their contracts upgraded because they use the Equality Act as a legal weapon, but also they used it as a weapon to get back payments for over 12 years. Literally, these are back payments to 2012. It's absolutely absurd that you agreed to a contract and then the legal process has retroactively said, oh, actually, that contract is absolutely meaningless. You should have been paying them more. Absurd. Totally absurd. The whole point of contract law is that when you and the other party sign an agreement on that contract, it is put through down to the letter. If we start using the Equality Act to say, actually, these contracts are completely meaningless and effectively only negatively affect the businesses, guess what? Businesses aren't going to bother coming here. Because how the hell are you supposed to expect a business to run if it can't even have its contracts enforced properly? Absolutely absurd. So the tribunal notes are a bit of a mammoth. And as mentioned in the article, the direct discrimination case actually saw that they had a decent defence under Section 69(1)(b) of the Equality Act, which states the sex equality clause in A's terms has no effect in relation to the difference between A's terms and B's terms if the responsible person shows that the difference is because of material factor of reliance on which A does not involve treating A less favourably because of A's sex than the responsible person treats B, or if the factor is within subsection 2 is a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. In other words, what they found was that the difference in pay between warehouse workers and shop assistants had absolutely nothing to do with sex. They had no evidence for it. But they had a different outcome when they looked at, and I'm not joking when I say this, indirect discrimination. It's right there on the screen. But we'll skip to the end of this section. So after a whole bunch of references to other cases to do with this particular case, the section concludes there is no real scope for any cost plus ingredient when the whole drive was about cost saving, a consistent theme of the relevant witnesses. In other words, the reason the shop assistants are paid less is because they want to make cost savings. And the conclusion is saying is that there was no real scope for explaining how it actually made cost savings that were justified. We recognise in the broadest sense that business decisions in the industry were not just about making profits. High street shopping has been on the wane, leading to the closure of stores and the loss of retail jobs over a sustained period. The claimants pointed out in closing submissions that there was no evidence the reduction in stores was the reason retail wages were held at or near national living wage rates. Well, that's because the jobs are really simple, and simple jobs typically are paid less, close to living wage, or minimum wage, whatever. But the first respondent has survived where many other retailers have gone to the wall. Next has survived where a lot of other clothing companies haven't. This was achieved by careful management, particularly in the field of budget planning. Difficult decisions made by businesses are not made with full foreknowledge of the headwinds, and so what may appear to be ungenerous wage settlements yesterday may transpire to have avoided business failures today. The fact that the first respondent had made substantial profits through the period, save for the year after lockdown, and could absorb the costs of the same basic pay for work of equal value, is a judgment the tribunal can pass with the merciless wisdom of hindsight. All that said, we are satisfied that with respect to basic pay, the legitimate aim of variability, resilience and successful business performance, fairly characterised, falls on the wrong side of the demarcation line of costs only with no element of costs plus. I have no idea, by the way, why language like this is constantly used in court case notes, but it's very annoying, and effectively I have to translate it again, because that probably all just sounded like white noise. Effectively, even though in the past, especially with COVID, plenty of other stores had to close down because of falling profits, and possibly even making losses, next were saying that this is why we could not increase wages beyond that of national living wage, effectively to keep the business running. The tribunal has actually said, well, with our hindsight, it turns out you could have actually paid them more, therefore you need to pay them more now. Basically, you succeeded as a business, now you need to pay your employees this ridiculous socialist, and I do mean that, socialist justification for pay. In that we're basically doing the same job. They're not, by the way. You even look at the difference between retail work and warehouse work, and you'll quickly see why warehouse work ends up getting paid more. But basically, you must pay them now because it turns out you made good business choices. Part of the good business choice being not raising their wages in the past to that of a completely different job. Something that they probably didn't even think about, because why the hell would this ever go to court? Oh, the answer? Because we live in an effectively socialist country. Even were we wrong, and this were a permissible aim, the payment of different sums of basic pay for the factors was not reasonably necessary to meet it. The business need was not significantly great as to overcome the discriminatory effect of lower basic pay, having regard to all the considerations we have explained above, including the financial headroom, and having given all due allowance for the non-wage amenities in retail. In other words, what they're trying to say is you get bonuses for being a retail worker, whether you're on the shop floor or whether you're in the warehouse. You know, they'll get different benefits. And they were effectively saying, oh, yeah, they get benefits working on the shop floor, but it doesn't cover the basic pay difference. So even though, again, they've agreed to this job for these benefits, for this pay, it's still not good enough. The old contract is gone. How is business supposed to run in a country like that? Mr. Short is correct to say that for market forces to be a trump card in this way would defeat the objective of the legislation. Lower pay in particular sectors due to indirectly discriminatory practices could then be lawfully sustained in perpetuity. In other words, we have this socialist legislation, and I'm sorry, but the free market, having all these reasons and theorem of working, because we've seen it work in the past, it's not good enough. Don't you see we have socialist legislation here that we need to adhere to? That's effectively what they're saying. We want to break the laws of economics because the law says so. This is absurd. There must usually be a more compelling business reason for such arrangements to be justifiable, such as with the incentivized productivity bonuses we considered below. Oh, so because they didn't say they're incentivized in other ways, or because they didn't directly say the job in the shop floor is easier, then the reasoning is bad. Their reasoning is bad, and therefore they need to have all the previous contracts, as I say, washed away to be replaced with new ones that includes backdated pay that breaks the old contract. All because we have the Equality Act that people like me have been saying is absolutely moronic for years. I mean, I can't believe that no one's complaining about it from, Birmingham. That's made the council have to make massive cuts because they had to pay £750 million for this exact same reason. Because they were discriminatory for paying different people in different work different amounts of money. Again, the indirect discrimination is basically a trump card against running a business properly. That is where we're up to in the UK. This is why I've made an emergency video on this, because I can't believe the reasoning being put forward here. And I cannot believe that there is no one in government, not even the Tories, saying, oh, this is obviously moronic. I imagine Reform will say that this is moronic, but, I'll wait for that. Because I don't think many people are going to be in favour of this when their clothes, food, and basically everything else that they buy ends up more expensive. Because women are having a hissy fit about having an easier job and getting paid less for it. And I can say that I've experienced both. So that's the state we're at in the UK. And by the way, as I say, Clown Decade, this is only going to get worse. Because the main reason this court case was able to be taken to court was because the government, Tory government by the way, had this ridiculous assertion we need to end unequal pay between men and women. We need to close the gender pay gap, which basically doesn't exist, by the way. But guess what Labour are bringing in? Labour has pledged to extend full equal pay rights to ethnic minority workers and disabled people if it wins power, which obviously it has. Currently, women have stronger protections on pay than other groups. Under party plans, a new Race Equality Act would enshrine in law the full right to equal pay for black, Asian and ethnic minority people, as well as disabled people. In other words, I'm pretty sure we already have race wage gap reports that are already out there. There are going to be plenty of people who want to take advantage of this. As was said by the barrister before, this is the first of many dominoes. In fact, no, the ones against the councils were one of many dominoes. We are in a world where if you have a different job to someone else, but it's in the same sector, you can demand equal pay for that job. Instead of just going over to get that job, have the onus on the employee to actually, better their lives. No, the law is in place to effectively bring equality for all. This is pure socialism. This is just another of many reasons this country is going to go from stagnation to complete and utter nosedive in terms of our economy, and not even just that, of the culture, of the social fabric, just everything that can make a country work. Labour seem intent on making worse, and the Tories did nothing to actually reverse that either. So here we are, in the worst of all worlds. So I hope you're ready for the next few years of this Labour government. It's going to get way worse. Anyway, with that is everything I had for you for today. In terms of streams, Tosh Talks tonight. Me and the panel are going to be talking about our schoolboy days, so if you want to hear a variety of stories of us when we were younger and in school, ranging from some of the worst comprehensives in Britain to even private schools, like myself, then do come along to that tonight. A community post will be made after 8 o'clock at some point. Regional variations, not heard any news on that yet. Don't know if it's coming back Wednesday. I sure hope it is. But obviously, once again, 100th episode of Laughing at the Guardian is on Friday. Got a whole panel of wahman. Please do come along. Help us celebrate. I've already seen a few articles from the Guardian that are absolute nightmares. I cannot wait. And with that, once again, please subscribe, become a member, etc., because that's everything I had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.